Hi, welcome back to my class, Cross-Cultural Understanding, with me, Andreas Yulianto from Jakarta International University, Indonesia. And today we are going to talk chapter 11, with the title Managing Language and Intercultural Conflict. We have talked a lot about language, communications, intercultural, interpersonal relationships, and so on and so forth. And today we are going to talk about the conflict, the possible conflict existing in intercultural communications, and we are going to discuss also the the way to solve the problem by managing language and other things. Yeah, and let's begin our discussions with learning objectives. There are 9 learning objectives of this class, and the first is identify and describe the nature and characteristics of conflict. Second, define intercultural conflict and describe its characteristics. The third, describe the role of language in intercultural conflicts. 4, identify 5 types of conflicts. And fifth, explain the potential impact of culture in conflict situations. 6, explain why it is important to consider the impact of social, political, and historical elements in intercultural conflicts. 7, explain the role of face and face safety in conflict situations. 8, identify preventive strategies that you can use to avoid threatening to the others persons face in a conflict situations. And the 9th, offer suggestions and strategies for dealing effectively and appropriately with intercultural conflicts. All right, now let's start our discussions with the introductions. This chapter or this today's meeting, we are gonna talk about the nature and the characteristics of conflict. And then we also explore the domains and the types of conflict. We also talk about the roles of language and culture in conflict situations, yeah, especially in intercultural interactions. And then we also discuss about the intercultural conflict communication styles and the impact of face and face work in a conflict situations. And at the end, we are going to discuss the intercultural conflict competence and constructive ways to resolve language and intercultural misunderstandings and conflict situation. Well, now let's discuss about the nature and characteristics of conflict. Yeah, there are many definitions of conflict. Now let's discuss the definitions based on the Mortensen and Adler, Folger, and Putnam. Here, according to Mortensen's 1974 page 93, conflict is an expressed struggle over incompatible interest in the distributions of limited resources. So this is a struggle that is expressed over the incompatible interest in the, let's say, limited resources in accordance with the limited resources. Yeah, and we also discuss about the conflict based on Adler et al. 2013. It is an express struggle, yeah, between at least 2 interdependent parties who perceive incompatible goals, scarce sources, and interference from the other party in achieving their goals. And we also have the definitions of conflict from Folger et al. That is the interactions of interdependent people who perceive incompatible and the possibility of interference from others as the results of incompatibility. Yeah, and then by Putnam, 2006, incompatibilities and express struggles and interdependence among two or more parties. Considering these four definitions of conflicts, we can underline some important points as the characteristics and the nature of the conflict. Actually, we can we can see that there are some key points and keywords that becomes the basic idea about the conflicts. Yeah, the basic ideas are the first, incompatibilities. Well, in a conflict situations, it appears as if an individual or group's gain means another's loss. Yeah, the parties involved may have incompatible goals or aspirations, or they may favor incompatible means to the same ends. For example, differing decisions, making technique, conflicting communication styles. Yeah, incompatibilities are commonly happened uh, in intercultural communications. Um, when we are when we are in discussions, for example, we'll have different ideas, different conclusions. Even we can have a different decision, and we also have such kind of techniques which is different from others. And sometimes, because of this situation, it can be the resources of the conflict itself. Yeah, we ourselves is basically different from others, and we have our own ideas, and others also have their own ideas, and this can be the situations where it triggers the conflicts. Next is the unexpressed struggles. For conflict to develop, the parties involved must recognize that they disagree about something. Um, Sometimes we are annoyed by somebody uh, who do who does something that is not acceptable, or break the rules. Let's say this somebody keeps arriving late to the meeting. Yeah, and unless you convey your displeasure either verbally or non-verbally in such way that is a person is aware of your displeasure, there is no conflict. But if we keep silent and let just it be, and so actually we are we will feel the conflict in our feeling, our mind. So that's if we say, if we convey uh, our displeasure, then sometimes it also becomes the conflict. Yeah. So it's very difficult in this kind of situations. Yeah. So that's why it is an expressed struggle. The struggle to express uh, about the disagreement about something that is unacceptable for ourselves. Yeah. Next is the scarce sources. Interpersonal conflicts arise when people believe that there are insufficient resources. The resources are materials, food, time, wealth, quality, educations. Yeah. So if there are insufficient resources for somebody, for everyone, so it creates or it triggers the conflict. The scarce sources can lead to conflict on the larger scale. All right. Sometimes um, we wish to join uh, in a program, in a second language program, for example. But because of the limited numbers of places, so conflict may develop here. And if the selection criteria are not transparent or fair, for example, it also becomes the conflict. Yeah. Next is the interdependence. Individuals or groups that are involved in a conflict are interdependent in some ways, even if they are not willing to acknowledge this. Right? In interpersonal relationships, for example, parties depend on each other for psychological, emotional, and material resources. Yeah, this as the human, we are affected by the behavior of the others, yeah, and vice versa. And a negative mindset sometimes also may prevent people from recognizing that they need to accept their interdependence and also work together in order to resolve their conflict. Next is the inevitability. What happened? What is inevitability? Well, as conflict is an inevitable fact of life, people routinely find themselves in a conflict situations, whether in their personal life, social life, or at work. Siblings, for example, may routinely come into conflict with each other and their parents about daily activities. Yeah. And at universities, for example, students, let's say they work on a project together. They may differ about how they should proceed, how they have to do the project. And sometimes in a romantic partners too, they may find themselves in a conflict about whether they should have sex or live together before marriage, or they have other ideas. Yeah. When intercultural couples, for example, have the children, they also may find themselves in a conflict situations when they discover they have uh, very different views about child rearing practices, and sometimes the role of religion and extended family members in their daily life. So there are many resources as the uh, uh, to be the conflict in the workplace too. Conflict about the tasks and the responsibilities may develop within work teams. So conflicts are everywhere in our daily life. Even when we are just keep silent at home, actually we also have a conflict with our mind, our feeling. Yeah. Next, now after we discuss the nature and the characteristics of the conflict. Now let's move to the domains and the types of conflict. It is also necessary to discuss the domains and the types of conflict. Chen and Starosta, 1998, and Folger et al. 2013, Orbi and Harris 2008, they know that conflict can take many forms and cross one or more socially and historically constructed boundaries. Right? Um, for example, age, gender, ethnicity, race, language, religion, etc., as well as perceiving incompatibility with individuals who share similar roots, let's say the same first language and cultural history. People may come into conflict with individuals or groups with different cultural, ethnic, linguistic, national, racial, political, and religious background. Yeah. So conflict can be in the many different forms, and it can cross one or more boundaries. The boundaries are age, for example, gender, ethnicity, race, even language and religion, right? And mostly the conflict is um, is triggered by uh, by the factors, some factors like different culture, different ethnicity, different linguistic, different nation, or even different religious background. This domains are very common happen, and I think we also experience this all situations in our life. Yeah. Uh, Now let's continue. Um, we also need to discuss the types of the conflict. Yeah. So what are the types of the conflict? Actually, gender and age gaps may also trigger the conflict situations, but there are several types of conflict and examples of conflict. So we are going to discuss this in these sessions. The first, um, intracultural conflict. What is intracultural conflict? Intracultural conflict refers to a struggle between individuals who, with a similar linguistic and cultural background. Oh, so this conflict happens between individuals with the, let's say, a similar linguistic, cultural, or maybe religious, or and many other things that that is the same. Yeah, so similar. They have similar background. And for example, two Australian EFL teachers in Seoul may become embroiled in a conflict situations when they vehemently disagree about the pedagogy that should be used in their language program. It is a very it is yeah, very usual. It's commonly happen, like in a let's say it is the same religion. So like the conflict it is between the pastors, for example. So sometimes they have the conflict because of because they find different ways of serving other people. The yeah, something like that. And the other is the interpersonal conflict. Yeah, interpersonal conflict also becomes the uh, um, one of the types of the conflict. Uh, it refers to the conflict or the struggle between two or more people who may or may not have a similar linguistic and cultural background. So it is the opposite of the intrapersonal conflict. Here, the conflict between two or more people who have different background, yeah, and here there are uh, characteristic of the interpersonal conflict as described by Abigail and Chan 2011. The first, the conflicting parties are interdependent. Yeah, so all the parties involved in the conflict situations, both of all of them depend one another, and they are interdependent. Yeah, and second, they have the perceptions that they seek incompatible goals or outcomes, or they favor incompatible means that to the same ends. So all of them, they have different perceptions. They have different goals. They have different means, yeah, to the same ends, yeah, for the same directions, yeah, the same destinations. I mean, yeah. The third, they perceived incompatibility has the potential to adversely affect the relationships, leaving emotional residues if not addressed. So this they also perceive the perceived incompatibility, and they have the potential. This compatibility um, can affect the relationships. Yeah, if not addressed. Yeah. Four, there is a sense of urgency about the need to resolve the difference. So the sense of urgency is different from one person and one another and another. So sometimes people would like or intend to solve the problem, resolve the problems as soon as possible, but sometimes so they have different sense of the urgency. Yeah. Next, intergroup conflict. So apart from the interpersonal and intrapersonal, there is also intergroup conflict, where it refers to disputes that arise between two or more groups of people. So it's not based on personal to personal or individual to individual, but it is between groups of people. Yeah, let's say uh, work groups, different ethnic groups, study groups, sport teams, debate teams, choirs, so on and so forth. And they have different objectives, they have values, communication styles, and wide range of cultural differences. And this all cause the problems, the conflicts, the conflict situations. For example, the business majors may come into conflict with English majors about the use of the same meeting space or other resources. For example, the computer rooms. Yeah. Next is the organizational conflict. The organizational conflict is bigger than the intergroup. Here, it refers to disputes that can arise within an organization. Let's say the business, educational or institution, yeah, a department or political party, social club. And this all results of competing the the idea or their problems usually because of the competing needs, the values, the beliefs, and the interests. Yeah, within organizations as well as in other contexts, conflict may be either affective conflict or a cognitive conflict. So now, what is affective conflict? It refers to a type of conflict that centers on an emotional conflict between parties. Affective conflict can be very destructive to companies and interpersonal relationships if unresolved. So it centers on the emotional one. So it bases on the emotional conflict between the parties. And the cognitive one, it refers to the type of conflict that centers on the completions of the task. Yeah, so it focuses on the completions of the task, the job, the duty. Yeah. And next, we also have the intercultural conflict. Yeah, we have interpersonal, now intercultural conflict. So the conflict is based between it is among culture. Yeah, it refers to the experience of emotional frustrations in the conjunctions with perceived incompatibilities of values, norms, face orientations, goals, scarce resources, processes, and outcomes between a minimum of two parties from two different cultural communities in an interactive situation. An intercultural conflict may materialize as our cultural ignorance and ineptness of oftentimes clutters our ability to communicate appropriately, effectively, and adaptively across cultural and linguistic lines. You know that it is commonly and regularly happen in all over the world. Talking about the cultures, as in the previous chapters, we have uncountable cultures actually, and everyone has their different cultures, and the 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 triggers for this intercultural conflict is because of the differences in the values, in the norms, in the face orientations, goals, and the processes and the practices, for example. Yeah. Next is the interracial conflict. It refers to the conflict situations whereby race or racial differences is an issue. Yeah. So we talk also about the race, where people are grouped based on certain criteria to separate, to differentiate the superior and inferior one. So it becomes the conflict. So now look at the examples. The dispute between African American customer and an Asian American shopkeeper may escalate when claims of overchanging and racisms are voiced. Yeah, white American and black American, for example, or even Southeast Asian with Northeast or West Asia or something else. Yeah, there are a lot of interracial conflict that we can find. Yeah. Now we also have interethnic conflict. So it refers to the conflict situations between individuals or groups which are affiliated with different ethnic groups. Yeah. So we have ethnicity. So here, ethnicity is the different ethnicity becomes the trigger for the conflict situations. A strong ethnic identity accompanied by ethnic hatred or distrust and inequalities can lead to conflict situations that may escalate into violence. Wow. And an extreme form of ethnic conflict may result in ethnic cleansing. That is the systematic and violent removal of an ethnic or religious group from particular territory. And genocide, that is the widespread killing of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. So it is very sensitive to have this inter-ethnic conflict. It can become very worse if it is not solved. Yeah. Next is international conflict. Yeah, it is refers to the disputes between the different countries. There are a lot of things that can trigger this inter national conflict. Currently, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and Palestine and Israel and other conflict, yeah, so between cross nations. Generational conflict right now. It refers to dispute between individuals or groups from different generations. Wow, different age, different yeah, different generations. Yeah. For example, the conflict between middle-aged immigrant parents and their children may arise due to differences in the language practices, in the values, in the beliefs, in the behaviors. And of course, it can also become more extreme. Yeah. Conflict can escalate and lead to an honor killing. Yeah. There are a lot of examples that we can find because of these situations. Next is the gender conflict. Yeah, we talked about the gender previously. It refers to the situations in which gender is the key factors. Let's say in the work situations, interpersonal conflict may arise between male and female co-workers due to the differences in the communication styles, the responsibility, role expectations, and power imbalance. Yeah. But day by day, right now, more women are entering the workforce and joining the professions once reserved for males. Yeah. Um, we also have the multiple conflicts where it refers to disputes between individual or groups that cross multiple social and historical boundaries. It can be different ethnic, different linguistic, different national, different race, different gender, or different religion or political background. Yeah, and intrapersonal conflict or self-conflict refers to the internal struggle that can occur within one's own mind. Yeah, this conflicted state can develop when we find ourselves having to choose between two or more mutually exclusive options. That is the types of the conflict. Yeah. Now let us talk about the cultural dimensions of conflict situations. True that culture plays a role in all conflict situations, whether intracultural or intercultural in nature. Yeah. It can be a dominant factor or it may influence the conflict in more subtle ways. Yeah. So culture really plays a fundamental role, a vital role in the conflict situations. And uh, uh, both personal characteristics and cultural dimensions uh, may uh, may trigger or may fuel the disagreements and conflict between individuals and group. Yeah. In a particular intercultural conflict situations may be caused by a range of cultural elements, including uh, mismatched expectations, higher level of ambiguity and uncertainty, language and nonverbal barriers, face and identity needs, and differing perceptions and understandings of conflict. Now let's us take a closer at each of these factors one by one. Now we talk about the mismatched expectations. What is the mismatched expectations? What happens when we have mismatched expectations? Expectations in a conflict situations are influenced by underlying values and norms that are prevalent in a particular culture. Ideas about what is appropriate verbal and non-verbal behaviors in the conflicts are learned during the process of socializations and vary among culture. Right. Everybody has our own expectations. Yeah. And sometimes our expectation is different from others. Yeah. Um, During enculturations, we talk about the enculturations previously. That is the socializations process. We develop ideas about what is appropriate or inappropriate behavior. Yeah. And we also have the cultural norms. That is the rules. Yeah, that guide us to do something and not to do something. Yeah, and the conflict script, for example, the interactions, placement, and appropriate sequence of verbal and non-verbal message exchange. And we have these perceptions, these expectations when we interact with other people. But then because they have a different way, different cultural norms, different way process of socializations, different cultural conflict script, cultural script, then it triggers the conflict. Yeah. Next is the ambiguity and uncertainty. It is also the reasons, the factors that triggers or that becomes the cultural dimensions. Yeah. When people interact with individuals who have different linguistic and cultural background, there is bound to be more ambiguity and uncertainty than in intra cultural interactions. Yeah, because of different language we use, different accent, different dialect, so it can be what we said, what we uttered, become ambigu, become different to become difficult to understand. Yeah. So now we also have developed the uncertainty reductions theory, where that is people are uncomfortable with ambiguity and strive to reduce uncertainty in a communicative events. Yeah, and we also discussed this actually in the previous meeting that here uh, the uncertainty, the URT, yeah, here people are uncomfortable with the ambiguity and strive to reduce the uncertainty in a communicative events. So intercultural conflict situations. Um, we also have cognitive uncertainty as the factors. Yeah, cognitive uncertainty refers to uncertainty about the views in which an individual's culturally influenced attitudes, yeah, and beliefs impact his or her own thinking. So we got a message from the, let's say, our colleagues, friends, families, religious figures, and it creates the uncertainty about what the ways about uh, the views, yeah, because we got the influence from them, and it impacts on the way of thinking and behavioral in uncertainty. It has to do with one's uncertainty about how the other persons will behave, yeah, in an intercultural conflict situations. Mostly people have um, different way, different behavior style, different ways to do something to the particular situations in a particular situations, and sometimes it becomes the trigger to a conflict itself. Yeah, and the uncertainty or anxiety management theory, we as we gain more knowledge and understanding of our communications partner, our level of stress or anxiety subsides. Yeah, people have different anxiety management. Yeah, sometimes people are too nervous or are too afraid to talk with other people who have different cultural background, and yeah, and it becomes the uh, conflict itself. And sometimes we also can get more knowledge and understanding of our communication style, our communication partner, if we if we if we if we move from the comfort zone. So this anxiety management is different one and another. Next is the, now we talk about the language and non-verbal barriers. Yeah. For many times we talk about the language and non-verbal barriers. Language is a key factor in all conflict situations. Yeah, that's true. And sometimes because of different language and different communication style, different non-verbal behaviors such as tone of voice, body language, gestures, posture, facial expressions, this all impact on the outcomes of both intercultural and intracultural and intercultural interactions. Next, we also have the face and identity needs. Yeah, this is also one of the cultural dimensions of conflict situations. Goffman's 1969 notions of face as a social phenomenon, yeah, that is created through communication. Brown and Levinson's define face as the public self-image that every member wants to claim for himself, something that is emotionally invested and that can be lost, maintained, or enhanced, and must be constantly attended to and in interactions. Yeah. So we have the dimensions of the face in they are positive and negative elements. So I think it's clear that the face is a social phenomenon and it is created through the communications. And it is also, it is the public self-image that every member wants to claim for himself. Yeah. Positive face right now. It refers to the person's desire to gain the approval of the other people. Everybody wants to do, intends to get it, to gain it. Yeah, when we are communicating, when we show ourselves in a, society, we we have the desire to get the approval, acceptance from the other. And negative phase, the desire to have autonomy and not to be controlled by others. This is the other phase. And some people also intend to get this negative phase, to gain this negative phase. That is the desire to be free, to get much more freedom in society to do anything they like, yeah, without any control from others and regulations. The way conflict is viewed and approached is influenced by our gender and cultural background. True. Now, we also discussed that differing perceptions and understanding conflict is also one of the dimensions of the conflict situations. Yeah, gender, different gender, and different cultural background, for example, they have different perceptions and understanding about particular case. The way conflict is viewed and approached is also different. Actually, it's not only limited by the gender and culture, but there are a lot of cultural things that can influence the way we feel the conflict itself. In a cultural context where collectivism is prevalent, the needs and wants of groups are given priority over individuals, and conflict tend to be viewed as destructive and harmful to relationship. And yeah, to preserve relational harmony and one's public face, pacifism is generally favored. That is, individual strive to avoid conflict situation. If conflict arises, people tend to restrain their emotions and try to manage disputes indirectly. Those who use this approach think that relationships are made stronger and conflict are lessened when emotions are kept in check. Yeah. In contexts that are more individualistic, self-reliance and personal independence are stressed. People tend to perceive conflict uh, uh, the open discussions of conflicting views, for example, as a potentially positive. Instead of shying away from conflict situations, individuals maintain that it is best to approach conflict directly. Persons who employ this style believe that uh, um, it is better to show emotions during disagreement than to hide or suppress our feelings. Yeah, and for this individual, this outward display signals one's concern and commitment to resolving the conflict. And the collectivisms, so these two are different from the collectivisms. Yeah, in this collectivisms, the groups are given priority over individuals, and conflict to be viewed as destructive and harmful to the relations. Yeah. This inequality can be happened in all situations in our life. In a collectivisms, it is very dangerous if the conflict happens, because it also can trigger very destructive and harmful to the intercultural relationship, such as China, Japan, and other countries, for example. Now, let's move to the intercultural conflict styles. There are many conflict styles that maybe you people know some or maybe many. Yeah, conflict interaction styles refers to the patterned responses to conflict in a variety of dissenting conflict situations. So this is the responses. We respond differently toward any kind of conflict in our environment. Yeah, and now we'll discuss the style, the conflict interaction style to respond the conflict existing in society. According to Blake and Malton, 1964 and Hall, 1969, there are five types of conflict behavior. Some people prefer to competing style, to have a competing style. That is the strategies used to reach one's own goals at the cost of other parties' goals or feelings. Yeah, and we sometimes also we have or prefer to have accommodating styles, where one's own goals are sacrificed for the sake of the other persons or the relationship. And avoiding style can be also the options. Behaviors that either ignore or refuse to engage in the conflict. Some people who like collaborative things, they prefer to have collaborating style. That is, all people involved in the conflict situations, they work together cooperatively until a mutually agreeable solutions is found. Yeah, and sometimes people prefer to have a compromising style. Compromising style. There is a give and take of resources with no one achieving his or her original goal. Yeah, so just like be humble. Yeah, everybody who is involved in these situations, be humble with all the situations. According to Rahim, 1983, as cited in Change 2004, he also mentions 5 types of conflict styles, and these all are based on the individual's concern for self or others. Sometimes people are willingly to dominate in the situations, in the conflict situations. They prefer to have the dominating style, a high self and low other concern. and obliging style, low self and high other concept. Sometimes people also use the avoiding style, where they low self and other concept or other concept. And people also may integrate style, use the integrating style, that is the high self and other concern. Yeah, and the last, they also compromising style, where uh, he moderates self and other concern or other concern. Yeah, the other conflict styles are uh, discussed by Wilmot and Hawker 2010. There are six styles. The first is avoidance, lose. So there is no one is winning the uh, conflict. And accommodations. So there is a win, there is loss. There will be one who will win and the other will lose. And competitions too, and passive aggregations. So there will be indirect aggressions or oppositions. Yeah. There is also direct aggressions, that is confrontations is there. The confrontations is there. Compromise, it is a negotiated loss and loss. Sometimes we just let it be. And as I previously mentioned, that no one will win. Yeah. And collaborations, everybody will win. Yeah. In this conflict starts. The model of intercultural conflict style. The most left one, we have a direct and indirect model of the intercultural conflict style. Yeah, and we have discussion style, we have engagement style, we have accommodation style, we have dynamic style. Yeah, and the upper one, the more we use the discussion style, but the lower one, the more we use accommodation style and dynamic style. Yeah, and the left one, we prefer to have a discussion style and accommodation style, and the right one, we are prefer to use the engagement style and dynamic style. Now the question is, what are these? What are these? Now let's discuss about this. Discussion style, a verbally direct approach to conflict situations that is tempered by an emotionally restrained response. People who adopt this style generally follow the maxim, say what you mean and mean what you say. Okay, they pay careful attention to their word choice so that their views are clearly conveyed. Intense expressions of emotions are avoided. So no intense expressions of emotions. Yeah. Instead, people prefer to calmly discuss disagreements and conversational, informal style, drawing on facts whenever possible rather than personal feelings. So many people also prefer to use this style. Discussion is sometimes is better, but then it can also create another problem, another conflict. But then the discussion sometimes can also be a good solutions for solving or making a decisions. Yeah. Next is the engagement style. It is characterized by more verbally direct and confrontational or direct approach to dealing with conflict. Yeah, the display of intense verbal and non-verbal expressions of emotions is considered an acceptable way to demonstrate one's sincerity. Yeah, and concern and willingness to work hard to resolve the conflict. Engagement style here, concerned about the uh, verbal confrontational or direct approach to dealing with the conflict. Yeah. It is more verbally direct and confrontational. Yeah. Next is the accommodation style. Accommodation style emphasizes a more indirect one and emotionally restrained approach to dealing with the conflict. To prevent a dispute from escalating, people who use this style employ ambiguous language, silence, and avoidance. Yeah, and emotional restraint here, um, where is regarded as the essential to maintaining interpersonal harmony among the parties. Emotional restraint here refers to the controlling of the expressions of one's emotion. So here people prefer to control the emotions, the expressions of the emotions. Yeah? And intermediaries or mediators may also be used to manage the conflict. We use the intermediaries such as mutual friends or colleagues, or mediators or third parties to help us to solve the problems. And also we have the negotiations in this accommodation style. That is a process by which the parties or group resolve a dispute by holding discussions and coming to an agreement that is mutually acceptable. Yeah, so the problem is negotiable. Yeah. Next is mediators and intermediaries are the third parties that may facilitate negotiation and dialogue between the disputants. Yeah, as I told you previously, that we need other parties to help us to solve the situations that cannot be solved between the individuals involved in the conflict situations. We have the dynamic styles. What is the dynamic style? It involves the use of indirect strategies and in emotionally intense expressions to deal with substantive disagreements. So it involves the use of indirect strategies and emotionally intense expression. So expressions is used here to deal with the substantive disagreement. The emotional expressions refer to observable verbal and non-verbal actions that convey emotion. So we use the face expressions, body movement, body gesture, and so on and so forth. People who adopt this dynamic style may use linguistic devices as hyperbole and metaphors, for example. They may also repeat their message, use ambiguous language, tell stories, or use third-party intermediaries to try to resolve the conflict. Thus, this style is characterized by emotionally confrontations, discourse, and expressions. That is the dynamic style. Now let's discuss the face work, and intercultural conflict uh, um, resolutions. Conflict phase negotiations theory, which address the way face losing and face saving behaviors influence intercultural conflict situations. In particular, her theory helps explains why individuals from high context culture, such as collectivist Asian settings, tend to manage conflict differently from people who have been socialized in a low context culture. For those who are individualistic, Western context, so on and so forth. These conflict phase negotiations are different based on the context of the cultures, either high or low itself. And it all this ways face losing, this face behaviors influence intercultural conflict situations. Yeah. Now, um, um, as we discussed previously, actually face is present in every culture on all over the world. Although the ways individuals or groups interpret the meaning of face and interpret phase. Yeah, within the social context of the conflict phase negotiations, phase refers to the claim sense of desired social self-image. We have a desire, whether we have positive phase or negative phase. We have this different desire. Yeah. Um, think Tommy's theory identified several types of phases. The first is the self phase. It refers to the protective concern for one's own image when one's own face is threatened in a conflict situation. Yeah. And we also have the other phase where the concern or the considerations for other conflicts parties image in the conflict situations. And we also have the mutual phase, refers to the concern for both parties image. Yeah, so self-image, other image, and mutual image. Yeah, mutual phase. Yeah, if self phase is for the concerns is the self or one's own image, and other phase is concerning for the others image, and mutual is both parties. Yeah, and mutual framework here, mutual framework is the process of constructing a shared sense of identity. Yeah, mutual phase work is the process of constructing a shared sense of the identity. So communicating respect and positive regard for self and others is referred to as a phase management, while phase work refers to the specific verbal and non-verbal behaviors that we engage in to maintain or restore phase loss and to uphold and honor phase gain. That is the phase work. Next, the conflict phase negotiations theory is based on the following assumptions. Yeah, so there are conflict phase negotiations. Yeah, and those conflict phase negotiations are based on the first. People in all cultures try to maintain and negotiate phase in a communicative events. Yeah, they have people try to maintain and keep their image in a communicative events. Yeah. And second one, the concept of face is especially problematic in emotionally threatening or identify vulnerable situations when the situated identities of communicators are challenged. Yeah, the concept of face here is problematic in emotionally threatening or identity. The third one, the culture values scales of individualisms, collectivisms, yeah, and small, large power distance. Shape, face work concerns, and styles. And the last, the D, the fourth one, the value patterns inherent and in individualism and collectivism shape members' preference for self-oriented face work or other oriented face work. Next, we also have the other assumptions, that is small and large power distance. Small and large power distance value patterns shapes members' preference for horizontal-based face work, informal, symmetrical strategies, or equal treatment versus vertical based face work, formal asymmetrical strategies, differential treatment. Yeah. And we have the value dimensions coupled with individual, relational, and situational factors, where these all influence the use of specific face work behaviors in a particular cultural scenes. And G, intercultural face work competence is the optimal integrations of knowledge, mindfulness, and communication skills in managing vulnerable identity based conflict situations appropriately, effectively, and adaptively. Now let's move to the intercultural conflict competence. The mindful management of emotional frustrations and conflict interaction struggles due primarily to cultural, linguistic, or ethnical group memberships differences. That's true. But then if we have this intercultural conflict competence, then we can manage the uh, conflict situations. Now that is what we are going to discuss this time. Yeah. Now we have the core elements in intercultural conflict competence. What are the core elements? The first is culture sensitive knowledge. Culturally based knowledge is the most vital ingredients in intercultural conflict competence. Without this without this culture sensitive knowledge, individuals may adhere to an ethnocentric stances, yeah, and judge all unfamiliar conflict behavior as weird and unsophisticated in a comparisons with their own, yeah, own ways of dealing with disputes. With more knowledge of diverse ways of handling conflict, let's say awareness of the conflict script and styles that are prevalent in the other cultural settings, yeah, individuals can suspend negative valuations and reflect on what may lie behind unfamiliar or unexpected behaviors in misunderstandings and conflict episodes. Without this sensitive knowledge of these cultural differences, of course it triggers a very sensitive conflict, and it triggers worse situations. So this competence, this sensitive knowledge should be enhanced in order to be able to build or enhance the quality of intercultural, interpersonal relationships. The other is the mindfulness. To effectively manage intercultural conflict, one must recognize the potential impact of one's personal and cultural communication expectations, conflict, communication style, cognitions, and emotional display on the conflict situations. Sometimes we don't care about others. Sometimes we marginalize or even we separate them, and we don't listen to others. And we ignore these differences, and we think that others are inferior than us. We have the mindful awareness that requires us to reflect on our own cultural ways of knowing and being, noticing how they are continually shaped by memories, experiences, and interpretations. So we have to have this awareness that every culture has different ways of knowing and being, and the way of noticing how they are continually shaped by memories, experience, and interpretations, how they interpret, how they experience, how do they practice something. Mindful fluency that requires us to tune into our own cultural, linguistic, and personal habitual assumptions in scanning a problematic interactions scene. Yeah, and we have the mindful communicator that may consider his or her emotional and cognitive reactions and reflect on why the individual may be responding in this way. So we have to be a mindful communicator to think that uh, don't easily judge negatively others' response toward our statement, but think first, consider others' emotional and cognitive reactions to know why they respond in a certain way. We have constructive conflict communications scale, yeah, refers to our operational abilities to manage a conflict situations appropriately and effectively. Our operational abilities, we use the language, the skillful language, the verbal and non-verbal behavior, whether in the first or second language. In a particular, skills such as deep listening, decentering, face-sensitive, respectful, full dialogue skills, mindful reframing, comprehension checks, and collaborative conflict negotiation skills are essential for intercultural mediators, especially when a second language is involved. So language is a core element in intercultural conflict situations. And if disagreement and disputes are to be solved in a manner that is mutually satisfactory, interactants, yeah, people who are involved in these interactions need well-developed interpersonal communication skill. And in many cases, proficiency in the language. Communications adaptability. Finally, in intercultural conflict episodes, we must be flexible and willing to modify our interactions behaviors and goals to meet the specific needs of the situations. For example, dynamic conflict code switching. Yeah, that is adapting our conflict styles to meet the other conflict parties' communications approach using their first language can signal our respect and desire to perceive the relationship and resolve the conflict in an amicable way. So the ethno-relativist, it is a ethno-relativist, yeah, where we appreciate all the differences, and we have to be adaptability. We have to be flexible and willingly to modify our interactions behaviors to adjust with the communications partners. So we can reduce the intercultural conflict. Now let's us talk about the managing language and intercultural conflict. The ability to thrive in multicultural world is now central to the survival. Yeah. It is a basic life skills on our shrinking planet. In every land, people from around the world pass through communicating, coupling, trading, and sometimes fighting. They make things together, share strategies and resources, draw on commonalities to build bridges, and come into conflict over differences. The need to summon creativity and exercise the choice to cooperate has never been more urgent. Yeah. While conflict is a part of every culture and is unavoidable in a human life, actually there are steps that we can take to enhance our intercultural conflict competence and prevent intercultural disagreements from escalating into destructive conflict. What are they? That is in a later discussions, but then in a more deeply discussions. But we can consider that all the conflicts in our environment can be solved actually, and everybody can find their own way to overcome all the situations. What we can suggest is that in a conflict situations, be aware of our own goals, and also be aware of those others' goals too. So, like, we cannot force our goals to others. We have to appreciate others, and bear in mind that the way conflict is expressed perceived and dealt with various among cultures. Yeah, in an intercultural interactions, our communications partner may not view the situations as what we do. So be careful. Make effort to understand the situations. Next, stay centered and push yourself to go beyond traditional stereotypes. Don't directly judge others. Don't make a snap judgment. Yeah. And very important thing is that listen attentively before responding. Your response is quiet, determining uh, the situations. Yeah, and when misunderstandings and conflict arise, try to understand both sides. Yeah, many angles should be considered, not only our view only. Yeah, be sensitive to face and identity needs. It is also important, and avoid personal attacks, offensive and abusive um, language. Yeah, um, even we also have to have when in a difficult situations, we also need to try to retain our sense of humor and be willing to let go of our hostility and feelings of revenge. Yeah, and also we need to be sensitive to the power dimensions in all conflict situations and check our perceptions of an intercultural conflict with trusted friends or colleagues. Yeah, recognize that people have different conflict style. That is very important. And try to generate possible solutions to the conflict instead of focusing on the difficulties. And identify our preferred conflict management style. Yeah. And be creative and expand our repertoire of conflict management strategies and recognize the importance of conflict. Recognize the importance of conflict, of context in a conflict situation. So we have to recognize the importance of certain context. So context is also very crucial actually. It also influences the conflict situations. Finally, we have to recognize that disputes do not need to end a relationship. It is a learning process to understand others, to get closer with others in intercultural relationship. I think that's it for today's meeting. We'll be meeting in the next sessions. Thank you so much for today. Bye-bye.